Okay, so this is going to be something simple, cut crease, neutral colors, maybe a bit warm. I'm starting off with moisturizer and primer, and also I put on chapstick always before I start my makeup just because I hate that pasty foundation look on my lips. We skip straight to eyebrows. I have started trying the soap method, which is where you have a bar of soap and you take your spoolie and you get the soap on the spoolie and you basically lay your eyebrows down. I think it gives more of a natural look. Haven't been feeling the whole eyebrow filling thing just because it's so harsh sometimes. After I do the soap method, I conceal under my eyebrows with the Fenty concealer. I'm in the shade 290. Um, yeah, this is kind of just with this part. I just conceal my eyebrows. I only do the bottom just because I feel like when you do the bottom and the top, it's gives you more of a harsh look. So I just do bottom to keep it more natural. And as you can see, after I conceal the bottom of my eyebrows, I kind of drag it down and use that as a, I guess you could say, base for the eyeshadow just because I'm not into eye primer. And so I drag the concealer down and I'll use my stipple brush to spread. And then I realized my stipple brush was leaving too many streaks, so I went back in with a sponge to kind of smoothen it out. And I don't ever really put an actual eyeshadow down, like a base on top of the concealer, because I like my concealer to be sticky when I start laying down my shadows. And we're starting with the, I think it's 35V palette by Morphe. We're starting with a almost light brown tan color. It's really warm. And I've learned that if you pack your shadows and then blend, you have a better result just because you get more pigment and it doesn't take as long as if you blend, add, blend, add, blend, add. It doesn't take as long. And I think I'm just going to do one eye and then skip to the next step just because this was probably the longest part of the entire video. After we take the tan, we'll take a darker brown with more of a warm undertone and blend that. As on top of that, that first shade was more of a transition shade. After that second darker brown, we're going to take a burgundy / maroon, red, brick color, whatever you want to call it, and blend that on top and use that to darken the crease. And you can see on the corners of my eyes, I'm dragging out the eyeshadow to give it more of a wing effect because at the end, we're going to do a really dramatic wing. Then we're going to go in with black just in the outer corner, not really bringing it into the crease too much. This is just to give the look a little definition and it not be so flat. After this, we're going to use the same concealer that I used to carve out the bottom of my eyebrows, my Fenty concealer in shade 290. I've learned a trick that if you use a flat brush and you put a bit of concealer on the flat brush and then use a towel to maybe like flatten the brush and then put more concealer on, it'll make it a lot easier to give you a precise crease. And then for the crease color, we're using a really pasty, pale, neutral, nude, whatever you want to call it, powder color for the crease. We're not going to do any glitter or anything like that. This is just one of those real simple looks. Now I'm blending that darker brick shade in the corner with a little bit of black just so there's a good transition between that lid color and the color that we used in the crease. After that, I'm taking my concealer and I'm cleaning up the wing part of the look. I normally don't do this because I think it just looks tacky. I like to blend it out, but since we're doing a wing, I guess it didn't really matter because the wing is going to cover it anyways. Now I'm using NYX eyeliner. I cannot think of the name. This eyeliner and the Wet n Wild matte liner is the only liner that I've ever used just because they work so good. And I'm not really into like the pen liners. I just feel like they dry out too quick. So I always use liquid. And this one, the NYX and the Wet n Wild matte one. I actually think they discontinued that. I haven't seen it in a while. After that, I go back in with my Fenty concealer and clean up the wing to make sure it's nice and sharp. After this, I'm blending in my concealer to make sure there aren't any harsh lines between the concealer and the shadow. Now we skipped and done the other eye, we're going straight into foundation. I'm using the Fit Me foundation by Maybelline. I have to use two different shades. I think it was 330 and 310 because just any foundation I ever use, I can never find the exact match. I always have to mix. So I'm mixing the two on the top of my hand and then dotting it in. Now, when I use foundation, I like to focus on my problem areas, which are my cheeks, chin, and forehead. That's where I break out the most and where I have the most scarring. I don't like to put a lot of foundation under my eyes because I know I'm going to highlight, and I just like to avoid being extremely cakey. And here I end up switching into the sponge again just because I think I need to clean my stipple brush because it's usually not that streaky, but it was really streaky. So I had to switch into a sponge. So I'm blending out my foundation again, keeping a lot of it just in my problem areas and not putting too much product under my eyes just because I know I'm going to conceal anyways. And also I like to use the leftover product on my nose. I don't put foundation directly on my nose because that's another thing that causes me to be really cakey. Here I'm going in with my Fenty concealer, highlighting chin, under eyes, forehead, and a little bit on my nose. We're blending that out. A lot of times I don't take my under eye concealer really low just because, I don't know, I think it makes my face look longer than what it already is. So we're blending out the concealer on the forehead. I love this concealer. It's so creamy and so easy to blend out. And it's really crazy because the foundation shade I have, which is also 310, is super light, but the concealer is perfect. Here I'm using banana powder by Makeup Revolution. I love this powder. This is the only powder that I have ever used that doesn't leave me with a cakey finish. But I'm powdering my under eyes, forehead, and nose, and Cupid's bow also. And we're going to let that sit. And now I'm going back in with those burgundy shades that I used on the crease earlier and darkening up my lash line while that powder sits. I'm using I think it's Lash Paradise by L'Oreal. I heard this is like a Better Than Sex dupe. The only time I've used the Better Than Sex is I got a sample. But it's really good, but I'm poor, so. We're going top lashes and bottom lashes. After this, we are highlighting, but not everywhere. I just highlighted the eyeshadow look. I highlighted brow bone and the corner of the eye. This is the Fenty Loose Powder Highlight, I believe, in Rose on Ice, I think. Her loose powder smells so good. Like, it's crazy. How do you make powder smell that good? Here, I didn't actually get this part just because I didn't feel like getting up to go get my sharpener and I didn't have a mirror close by. So I'm using a nude, not really nude, more of like it's not white, but it's not brown. It's like a really pale tan, and I'm putting that in my waterline. I think that color is really flattering, more flattering than white because sometimes white is too harsh. Now we're doing lashes. I'm actually not sure what lashes these are. I'm using this glue. I absolutely love this glue. I got it from Walmart. It has aloe vera in it, but the applicator and the product itself, how the formula is, you can put it on and you can see it looks like this blue color. And when it dries, it turns clear, but it stays really tacky and it doesn't dry too fast. While I let the lash glue dry, I'm using my Fenty Beauty blotting powder, and I'm using that to dust off the baking powder. After I do that, I go ahead and use that same highlight, the Rose on Ice, to highlight my cheekbones. I believe I did top of the nose or tip of the nose and possibly Cupid's bow, I believe. I think that's all I did for highlight. I think later on I go back and I do the forehead also. But after the highlight, I go in and I go ahead and start putting on my lashes. These lashes are so... At first I didn't like them because I felt like they were too dramatic. But then I started wearing them and I was like, okay, these are cute. They're really thick and they're like, I don't know what you would call it. Tapered? Not tapered. Like they are like long, short as the lashes go on. And I feel like those like make the eye look so pretty. But I'm sticking those on. You see, I didn't really have a problem sticking those on because that lash glue is amazing. And then I'm going in and I'm bronzing. I'm actually using a hard candy bronzer. Only bronzer I've ever used. I've always wanted to venture out and try new bronzers, but I'm always so scared. But I do the forehead. I don't really have a big forehead, but I still like to bronze the forehead and cheeks. And then I'm going back in and I'm giving my cheekbones a little bit more dimension, nothing too harsh, and a little more dimension to the forehead just to give my face a little more color so I don't look too pale. Oh, this is when I go back in and I highlight the forehead just above the brows. Got tongue tied. Oh, and the Cupid's bow there too. After this, I felt like I did something else after this. But yeah, I love that highlight. It's so pretty. It's, even though it has like a pink undertone, it's not a pink undertone that's too harsh. Oh, I ended up going back in and there's this purple color in that same palette that I was using. And I put that under the lash line just because I felt like it would give, you know, purple shadows bring out brown eyes. So I was like, well, why don't we add, since we already used the reds and the browns, how about we use some purple at the lash line? It ended up looking really pretty, actually. I love doing like different colors at the lash line. And then I went back and I added some brow gel, just a little bit, not too much, just to define the hairs a little bit more. And that is it. That's everything. Hope you enjoy.